My name's Jonathan Lee. I'm with Marcus Warry here. We helped organise this event. We did the EU debate last year, which I think I recognise some of you from that as well. And hopefully we might, or unhopefully might do ones like this in the future about Welsh independence, Northern Irish independence, Cornish, or maybe even English, or London independence. I don't know. So I mean, hopefully, I think with the panellists, or the debaters, speakers we've got, I think it's pretty much guaranteed to be a more entertaining and insightful debate than possibly the Alistair Darling and Alex Salmon debate on STV the other night.
Hard to make it worse.
But yeah, very quickly, I'll hand over to Marcus to quickly explain how the format works. But thanks very much to Lansdowne Club for giving us this great venue. Thanks everyone for turning up. I hope you enjoy it and have a few drinks afterwards. But very quickly, to my left, we've got Hardeep, Singh, Kohli, who you might recognise and you can see from the bits of paper in front of you, who's a comedian, writer, broadcaster, who you'll recognise from the BBC, Question Time and other programmes. And to the left, we've got Mark Littlewood, who is Director General, the main man at the Institute of Economic Affairs. And further on to so these two guys are yes to independence, and then two guys no to independence. We've got David Coburn, who I think is right, is the first ever Scottish MEP. Is that right?
First the Scottish UKIP MEP.
UKIP MEP. Okay, that's right. And then finally we've got Rory Broomfield at the end, who is director of the Freedom Association and is
disenfranchised Scot.
Also Scottish and Swiss as well. Still Scottish, but is arguing for the motion no to independence. But I'll now hand over to Marcus and we'll go from there. I'll be around at the end with the bucket so you can put your votes yes or no if you make sure you keep hold of those, and then we'll do the final vote.
Hi there, I'm Marcus Warry, the chairman of the Lansdowne Debating Society. I'll be quick. Format is 3 to 5 minutes per speaker, so we have enough time for questions and interaction from you guys, so get thinking about your questions now. Try and make them concise and ideally good. That would be great. We've taken a vote before, as you know, so I'll reveal the result of that now. So we have 17% yes, 72% no, and 9% undecided. Doesn't that work out?
And in independent Scotland there would be a better education system.
And Mr. Sadler count the votes.
It's 11% undecided, actually. I'm quite confident that was just a simple lack of deduction skills. Now, the voting, occasionally during, I'll ask to see where the momentum's moving and do a very scientific method. By holding that in the air, or that in the air, a bit like Ready, Steady, Cook, if you've seen that, I'll be able to take an assessment of whether the mood's changing over the course of the night. And then, when you make your final vote, which will be during the closing speeches, you just tear off the flag which represents your view, and then that will be tallied up, and we'll give a final result at the end. If any of you are into Twitter, you can start tweeting at Real Debates, and I might even incorporate the old tweets into it. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, which will be Hardeep Singh Kohli, speaking for the yes side of the argument. Big round of applause for Hardeep.
Apologies in advance, I've just done a run at the Edinburgh Festival, so I may revert to material you weren't expecting. And also, on behalf of Marcus, it's a rule of mine not to speak on all male panels, generally speaking. I think in this day and age, we should try and represent 51% of the population more effectively, but I understand there's great difficulty securing a woman for the panel, so that ought to be noted. I know Marcus tried very hard to do that.
I'm a screaming queen, does that count?
That is going to be the level of debate from UK this evening, ladies and gentlemen, so let's look forward to it. In a sense, it doesn't really matter what you think if you don't live in Scotland. And luckily, due to most of my broadcasting work, it doesn't really matter what you think of what I say, either. Other than, I'd like just to ask you a few questions in the hope that you might posit some answers of your own. On the issue of democracy, Scotland is and has been traditionally a centre-left social democratic country, pretty much since the Second World War, with spells of unbroken change. England is a centre-right, a right-wing country. That seems to me to be wrong. It seems to be wrong that Labour governments in Westminster are bolstered by a Scottish vote. The West Lothian question keeps coming up and still hasn't been resolved. So, if we genuinely believe in democracy, if our parliament less than a mile from here is the mother of all democracies, perhaps we should start engaging in democracy in a more meaningful way. I come back to the issue of representation again. It's 2014, women have had the vote for almost 100 years and 22% are represented in Westminster. Now, Holyrood doesn't do a great deal better at 35%, but for a 17-year-old parliament, a 50% improvement on Westminster is notable, and that will only change for the better. There is a democratic deficiency. Scotland has imposed upon it policies it never voted for. Wars, it was always against. The poll tax is a great example. The bedroom tax. The list is as long as you're on, you know. But the single biggest beneficiary from Scottish independence, the single biggest beneficiary is England. You are such a centralised country. We suffer that as a nation in union with you. But you suffer that yourselves. Even your senior Tory MPs don't know the difference between the North West and the North East. They can frack off. You singularly lack representation. Any ideas of federalisation across England seem to be poo-pooed, you know. And here's the realpolitik of it. We could talk about currency. We could talk about currency till the next debate, Marcus, and that those of you will not be happy with the answers. But here's the realpolitik of it all. Doesn't matter what anyone says. We live in unprecedented times. Never before in modern political history has the Chancellor and Exchequer in Westminster tied in perpetuity the government of Westminster to saying no to a shared currency. Can you think of another instance when the Chancellor and Exchequer has made that sort of pronouncement? The realpolitik of it is as simple as this. There will be a shared currency. Because no one benefits from there not being a shared currency. That's the simple truth. Scotland, to the tune of £1,200 per man, woman and child, subsidises England. The bits you're meant to laugh at, you don't. The bits that are serious, you're chuckling away at. Check your figures. We do. We've just found the biggest oil field in the North Sea, in the history of the North Sea. Not many of you have read about it, I imagine, because the company that discovered it has sent all workers home on full pay till after September the 18th. Scotland's the only country in the world, and I'll buy a drink or two for anyone that can name me another, the only country in the world to discover oil and get poorer. Come with me to Aberdeen. We'll stand on the shore, we'll look out at oil wells dotting the horizon. Then you turn 180 degrees on the same point, and there are more food banks. In a country that should be the 7th wealthiest in the world, we have 100,000 children heading for poverty. Do you think that's going to change under the current arrangement? I don't think it is. People are saying, is it going to be okay after independence? I don't want okay after independence. I want fucking amazing after independence, because that's what the Scots are able to do. We invented economics, we invented banking, we invented penicillin, television, radio, sectarianism. We pretty much invented everything. There's no reason why we can't go ahead as an independent beacon of centre-left thinking. I realise perhaps this is the best room to convince people about centre-left thinking. But whatever else, we know there is something rotten in the state of Westminster. We know that, regardless of the outcome of this referendum. There is something wholly wrong with the body politic in the United Kingdom. The only single compelling reason I might have to stay in the Union is to stay and help you fix that. But I don't believe we can. Independence is Scotland's birthright. We're not creating a nation, we're restoring a nation. Think on.
Thank you, Hardeep. Without further ado, I'll introduce David Coburn, AV. Thank you.
Well, I never thought I'd be following Hardeep Singh Kohli. It's a tremendous honour. I hope I can be just about as funny as he is. Generally I am. The bedroom tax can be got rid of very quickly in Scotland simply by people voting UKIP, as many people did. And if you want the country to be less London-centric, that can be done equally well by voting for UKIP. So quite frankly, you don't need Scottish independence to have a change of the way the country is governed. You just vote for a different party. Okay, Mr Salmon said he would keep Scotland UKIP free. Well, he singularly failed in that. Just as many Scots are as vexed about what's going on in terms of immigration, in terms of the European Union, as there are in England. Although we're kept out of the press by the BBC in Scotland very much, and also the press up there. You know, they are vexed about these questions, and just as worried as anyone else. They threw the entire weight of the Scottish state behind Mr Salmon to stop us getting in. We still got in. There's a dirty wee secret the SNP would rather you didn't know, and that's that they emerged from fascism in the 1930s. And quite frankly, the way they behaved in the referendum, terrifying people, bullying people, frightening businesses, very much fascism of the 30s. Their leader, Professor Hay, was banged up during the war like Sir Oswald Mosley as a danger to society. A very good idea, in my opinion. What sort of Scotland does Mr Salmon want? Well, we're already seeing. I mean, I'm a libertarian, as you know. I want libertarianism. Left, right no longer exists. It's libertarian v authoritarian. I want libertarian. Mr Salmon, you can see by his actions, wants authoritarian. He wants to rewrite the ancient Scottish laws like corroboration, which means you have to have two people to witness anything. He wants to limit land ownership, very much like Robert Mugabe. He merged all the police forces recently against the warnings of Sir Robert Peel that that's one good way to French-style authoritarian gendarmerie, which they have in France even to this day. So we now have one police force under an extremely authoritarian Justice Minister called McCaskill. Basically, they want to bring political correct social Marxism. Remember Rotherham, what's going on up there, with officers dependent for their positions on politicians. Positively Kafkaesque, I'd say. They've also armed the police with Glock automatic pistols. Now, why would police need Glock automatic pistols in Inverness out in the Highlands of Scotland? Are they expecting a Jacobite rebellion? What do they need those things for? It's not exactly filled with Afghan warlords at the moment, although Mr Salmon's doing very very best to make sure it is. Named person. This is terrifying. SNP have already passed this law. Every child in Scotland has a named person watching over them. That means a Stasi spy in every home in Scotland. That is terrifying. That is worthy of Goebbels, it's worthy of Stalin. It is appalling. This is what they've already done. This is the sort of authoritarian country they want. They want to brainwash the kids as well. People are sick to death of it. That's why the man's not going to get in. Who would be the named person? Well, I mean, you could have Jimmy Savile. He was a public figure, nice sort of a chap. Didn't do very well. Then, of course, there's the Methodist minister who put crystal meth back into Methodism and ran the HSBC. It was only to the Co-op, rather, which is very popular in Scotland. They want us to have an authoritarian state, and they want to make sure that that young Scots don't have a future. I want to bring Adam Smith and Andrew Carnegie to Scotland. I want to lift the dead hand of the socialist state that gets most young people out of Scotland. The reason why they have to import immigrant labour to Scotland is because so many young Scots leave, because nobody wants to be told you are an evil person because you want to make money. I want a different sort of Scotland. The Alexander and his chums want something that's terrifying, something that will make the DDR, the Democratic Republic of Germany, look positively benign. And I want nothing of it. Let's keep our country together.
So on to the next speaker. We have Mark the History of Economic Affairs.
Well, thanks very much for inviting me. I'm an Englishman. Hardeep's right, I don't really have a dog in this fight to some degree, and it's a topic I've weighed on. And Chairman, you've been very clear that we must keep our comments brief, and I intend to, because I have a cast iron rule that I never speak in public for longer than I can make love in private. So in conclusion, I just wanted to run through a few things about why I think, and why I've increasingly become a supporter of the Yes campaign in Scotland as an Englishman. And let's get one out of the way. We might as well run it up the flagpole and see if anybody salutes. There is the sort of mean-spirited English argument, particularly from affluent English. I'd say I disagree with Hardeep, that's fine, we can have disagreements on one side of the debate. I think overall the evidence is that England, and particularly London, where I live, subsidises Scotland. The Scots, in return for this, make sure that they cheer on Argentina and Germany against England in any penalty shootout that we ever get in the World Cup. A mean-spirited Englishman might be losing his patience somewhat about this. But I think that is a mean-spirited argument. I think there are some really good arguments for independence. Firstly, and Hardeep referenced this, England and Scotland are growing apart. Actually, if you go back to the 1950s, the Conservatives won the most number of seats in Scotland. There isn't that one Conservative MP in Scotland. There are fewer Conservative MPs in Scotland than there are counties. Scotland consistently votes for the centre-left. England pretty consistently votes for the centre-right. That's not a clincher. I don't think you suddenly split up a country because one part of it votes red and one part of it votes blue. But it seems to be pretty consistent. And if England and Scotland have, over a generation or more, determined different destinies, we need to reflect that in our constitution. Secondly, there are constitutional dangers because of that conflict. I think it's likely that at the next general election, or a very plausible outcome, will be that Ed Miliband will walk into number 10 Downing Street. Entirely because, and dependent upon, a block of Scottish Labour MPs, with England having voted more likely for the Conservatives, both in terms of votes and MPs. That, I think, would lead to a rise of potentially unpleasant English nationalism. If we don't solve that constitutional problem in advance, it could kick off nastily when we get there. Hardeep referenced this as well. We have an absurdly centralised state in the United Kingdom. In broad terms, about 90% of government expenditure is controlled by the centre. Now, every opposition government that comes to office promises us devolution, localisation. Do you remember the big society? That was all going to be getting power down to the local level. I remember the big society. I certainly don't understand the big society, but that seems to be its basic thrust. Never actually happens. So I think if you actually want to devolve government, you're not going to get it unless you go for independent government for some of the nations of the United Kingdom. Adam Smith's been referenced. Hardeep mentioned that the Scots have a proud economic history. David mentioned that he'd like Scotland to follow the teachings of Adam Smith rather than the teachings of Goebbels, and I agree with at least that part of his speech. I think, and I'm a believer in, that at an individual level, and at a regional and a national level, in self-sufficiency, in standing on your own feet. I actually think the Scots need to rediscover some of the free market principles of Adam Smith. But by being locked into the United Kingdom and being subsidised by Westminster, I think they've lost sight. And then I'd say divorce, I think, doesn't always need to be messy and acrimonious. My ex-wife would strongly disagree on this point, but there's no reason why it need be acrimonious. I think that mature nations, and we are mature nations, can go their separate ways, wishing each other well. We don't need to make this an unpleasant fight. We shouldn't even really see, I think, the union as a marriage. We should see it as two flatmates who have lived together but now want to pursue their own destinies. So I say strike out, be bold. If the former communist countries in the Soviet Union could quite easily resolve these questions of what currency to have, what to call themselves, how to organise their military arrangements, former Soviet Union countries could do that, having been under the yoke of that ghastly regime, then Scotland can do it too. Have faith. Don't worry so much about taking a leap in the dark. If we have the self-confidence to make sure it is so, things will work out just fine. Vote yes. Thank you.
And last but not least, for the no camp, Rory Broomfield, he is Director of the Freedom Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus, and thank you to the Lansdowne Club for hosting this. I find myself in quite an awkward position being Director of the Freedom Association and also Director of the Better Off Out campaign on this side of the argument. However, I hope I will demonstrate that they are completely different votes. And they are different votes because there are certain questions that have been unanswered. And the Freedom Association has gone up to Scotland provoking these questions, and David was very kind to speak at one of our events. But questions that remain unanswered about what happens next, and I completely agree with David that the authoritarian nature of the SNP will come into play as they will lead negotiations for an independent Scotland, not just with the rest of the UK, but with the European Union and the wider world. Now, they may wish that, but of course, they wish as well to take Scotland into the European Union. And as part of my Better Off Out hat, I must warn against this, but they still want it. And they want, therefore, to trade their currency for the euro. That's the currency debate sorted, because entry into the European Union will require euro adaptation alongside Schengen. That's another point that hasn't been raised in the debate, but of course a new member state, any new member state entering into the European Union has to adopt these rules alongside criminal justice measures which they may wish to opt out. Now, of course there's an effect on Scotland. There's also an effect on the rest of the United Kingdom. We currently have 7.5% of the vote in the European Parliament. We have one commissioner out of 28 from the UK, not representing the UK, and we're outvoted about 86% of the time in the Parliament on all the votes, and David will know this quite well in the coming years. The problem is, we will have a reduced vote, we will have a reduced presence, and I'm sure Mark will agree with me that over the past few years, the European Union has become increasingly aggressive against the City of London. Now, how will the rest of the United Kingdom be able to stand up to that? In fact, Mark wrote very kindly for In Defence of the City, a Freedom Association publication, that banker bashing became a new national sport. In fact, it became an international sport, with members of Greece and Spain and that well-known financial centre, Poland, making rules for the United Kingdom. Now again, that's a problem, but of course we've got our international standing in the rest of the world. We will be the first developed nation to cut ourselves in two. We will be going to the UN Security Council having done this. We'll be going to NATO having just done this, with questions yet to be resolved over nuclear deterrence, over economies and the like. But we are a prosperous nation together. We are one of the most integrated economies in the European Union. We have over 70% of trade going between members of the United Kingdom. This could very well be put in jeopardy. And of course, our international standing, we are better together. In 2012, the UK had the largest, or came top of the league, of soft power nations. Our flag resonates, our presence resonates. And at a time of international terror and threat, I don't see the logic in breaking us in two, when in fact we have a proposition and a voice in the world. I don't want to see that diminished. I think we're better together. Thank you.
Thanks very much to all the speakers. It's now your turn. So get ready or thrust your hand in the air if you're ready to go straight away. Otherwise, I'll take one of my pre-planned questions. Do I have anyone? The gentleman here. We've got a roaming microphone here. Actually, I need someone to come and. Jonathan, do you mind? Hey.
Excuse me, can I just ask for some clarification? Because are we actually debating whether Scotland should have independence or whether England should keep Scotland? Because obviously you're going to get two different decisions. But are we debating that it is better for the Scottish people to be independent? Or are we debating it's better for England to have Scotland?
I'm glad you asked that. I thought something you might. So basically, it's up to you guys. I'm interested in what English people think, even though we don't actually have a vote, and what Scottish people think, even though they do have a vote. So for me, it's up to you to decide how you feel that.
I think in a debate of this importance, terminology and language is crucial. To use a phrase like, should England keep Scotland? It's just probably drummed up another 5 yes voters. Do you know what I mean? We're not your goods in chattel. You know, our nation's in a union. We don't belong to England, so that ought to be clarified.
That's not
Thank you. Did that clear that up? Yes, over here. If you could pass the mic, thank you.
Okay, so thanks very much for an entertaining introduction to the debate. I'm an English person living in Scotland, working in London, so I have quite a wide range of views on this subject. So, Hardeep, actually I'd like to ask you a question, because of all the speakers here tonight, for me you were the most serious in the debate, and it is a very serious debate for those people that actually live in Scotland. But for me, there are so many unanswered questions in the white paper, and in respect of things other than the currency, like energy policy, like income tax, like passports, etc., etc. Is 2 years enough in the event of a yes vote to come to conclusion on the unanswered questions? Because that's all that there will be to negotiate terms.
Sure. I think that 2 years is... Scotland doesn't become independent in 2 years. It starts its journey of independence after 2 years. There is a slight, not in your case at all, but a slight fetishization with unanswered questions about what happens post-independence. As if any of us are sure what's going to happen post the next budget. As if any of us are sure what's going to happen in the next general election. As if any of us are sure of anything in politics. The real worry is this, that the wool is being pulled over our eyes. I mean, David Coburn is hugely entertaining, and I sold out at Edinburgh, he would have sold out twice over with such brilliant comedy, that to cite in the Scottish independence debate, Jimmy Savile, the guy that ran the co-op, and Rotherham, and that for the UKIP to call the SNP fascists when we don't generally refer to people from Cambodia as ting-tongs, or think that we have bad weather because of homosexuality, is genuinely one of the funniest things I've ever heard. So, if I'd said to you 20 years ago we would see Martin McGuinness, Jerry Adams sitting with Reverend Ian Paisley, working together in the north of Ireland. Would you have believed me? It's time to wake up to realpolitik. These things will be worked out. They'll be worked out with goodwill on both sides. I'm a Scotsman that wants England to do really well at the World Cup. I'd like you to win it again, basically because I'm fed up of hearing about 66. But there is goodwill in Scotland. Even we should change that. It isn't the final, but no country is final. Democracy is dynamic. It will be worked out. We have the greatest minds in the world in Scotland, amongst others. We will work it out.
Thank you. Over to David.
Well, number one, Ollie Wren, who's a former European Commissioner in charge of the finance and goodness knows all what, came out today and said that it's going to be impossible for Alex Salmond to negotiate with the pound, with a semi-detached from the pound. You have to be accepted, as the currency of Scotland before they could even start to think about joining the euro. I managed to get Herr Juncker, the head of the European Commission, European Parliament, to state the same as his predecessors, that Scotland will not be allowed into the European Union, that Scotland must reapply, and he further said the day after in his presidential speech that it would be 5 years before any new country is allowed in to the European Union, and that would mean we'd be getting in after Turkey. Which means that Mr. Salmond is going into an election with no idea what currency he's going to be using, a foreign currency, the Bobby, the goodness knows what else he's going to try and use. Now he wants us to be like a sort of Panama. Well, that sounds very exciting, and that's really exciting Scottish business. And lots of Scottish business are getting out of Scotland. There's been a flight of capital, and believe you me, if Mr. Salmond gets his way, there'll be a massive flight of capital from Scotland. I don't see how that's going to help jobs or anything else. And I see absolutely no possibility of a proper resolution of this currency aspect. And Mr. Salmond is not offering independence. Get this right. Mr. Salmond is offering rule from Brussels politically, and he's offering rule from Frankfurt on the money side. He's not interested in Scottish independence. This is an exercise in extreme socialist economics. It's nothing whatsoever to do with independence from Scotland. If he was interested, why does he want to fill the country up with people from other nations, except the English? Anybody can come to Scotland unless you're English. And if that's not racist, what is?
This whole argument about the pound or the currency, I think, is a moot point.
It's not a moot point. If you're in the Scottish business, how is it a moot point for a Scottish businessman trying to watch the news for currency 6 months?
David, let him make his point.
Any country in the world can adopt the pound as its currency. North Korea has adopted the euro as its reserve currency. This is not a vote by the European Parliament or by the European Commission. We could, in the UK, choose to adopt the US dollar, if we wanted, as our reserve currency. If an independent Scotland decides it wishes to treat the pound as its sovereign currency, it can do so, whether George Osborne, UKIP, the Labour Party, like it or not. Nothing can stand in the way of that. What I find a bit extraordinary from the arguments that David and Rory have put forward, I think they overstate the case about socialism in Scotland. But their entire argument about the UK and the European Union is we in the UK should decide for ourselves. If Scotland wants to go and vote for all of these sort of things that they don't like, too bad on them. They've got to go and fight that Scottish election and see whether they can win it. The idea that Scotland shouldn't be able to pursue these policies is very similar to the arguments we hear from Brussels that the UK shouldn't be able to pursue its independent policies. Scotland needs to decide for itself. And if you don't like the agenda that, say, the SNP would put forward in independent Scotland, vote for another party. It's as simple as that. 2 years, going straight out of the question, 2 years I think is easy enough. Rory, I think, was slightly unfair to Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia split into the Czech Republic and Slovakia relatively easily. You might not think it a developed country, but I think in considerably worse and more difficult circumstances, a divorce happened. The idea that it is beyond the wit of man to bring about a similar divorce in a mature union like the United Kingdom is utterly low. It would happen,
Thank
it
you.
could be done, and not be as dramatic as anybody else.
Thank you, Mark. Just a quick one. There's a thing going around. You talked about your email address so you get future debates. I should have mentioned that earlier, so apologies for interrupting. But there's a bit of thing going around. Hopefully that will work in the back. Just before I go to the lady over there at the back, pick up this thing, this bit of paper, because as soon as I print them out, I might as well give this a bash. At this early stage of proceedings, I'm going to very scientifically work out whether I think there's been any change so far, based on what we've heard. So can you put it clearly in the air? If you're yes, then present the Scottish flag. If you're no, then present the British flag. And I will see whether bearing in mind it was 17% yes, 72% no.
There's an alcohol.
I'd say there's slightly more.
Undecided.
I think there's slightly more yeses than there were before, actually, based on, I'd say, let's go with 23% now, from 17. So, sneaking back from the initial start. And so the lady at the back wants to make a question. Can we get the microphone over to her, please? Thank you.
Good evening, in Queen's English. But I'm half Scottish, so I can do that. And I'm half Irish, so I can do jiggers. Now, the people who are saying yes, and I'm going to be provocative, one is English, and one is a gentleman born in Scotland. The two people who are on the no side are Scottish, and I would guess always have been Scottish. Now, as I say, that's slightly provocative. So I've started by saying I've been brought up in England, I had a Scottish mother and I had an Irish father. There is something wonderful in the name Great Britain. Great. Not for nothing great. That's been achieved. I think there was a great percentage that something like 70% of the British ambassadors abroad in the 70s and 80s were all Scottish. We have taken hundreds of years of enmity and friendship and goodness knows what to come together. And it was Scotland's financial problems that brought it to ask England and the Welsh and the Northern Irish and at that time the Southern Irish, can we please gang together? To quote Robert Burns. As a woman, at the moment, I have never felt more vulnerable in my life thanks to Alex Salmond. How can 6 million people, if I'm right, in Scotland hold to ransom the Scots or the British or anybody else in the whole of this wonderful United Kingdom? We have great attributes.
Listening around this argument, we want to get as many people involved as possible. Could you move towards either a question or a conclusion on this, please?
Yes, I'm saying as a woman, at the moment I am feeling incredibly vulnerable. I have never been made to feel more vulnerable in my life than I have at the moment because of Alex Salmond. And today we have this Muslim beheading, potentially, of a woman in north of London. Okay? So the big question is, so my question is, as Great Britain, if we do not have the present monarchy and the army, and if we have a president of Scotland to whose allegiance is the army, are you going to go back and find the Spanish throne?
Okay, this is more than enough. We're going to just leave that as a comment. And
these are comments that have not been addressed, and I have heard nothing to be reassured.
Right now, you know nothing about the heading in North London. You know nothing about it. Your command of geography is, I'm afraid, poor at best, which is surprising if you had a Scottish education, which is a good education. There's a massive difference between Great Britain and the United Kingdom. And how, as a woman, can you feel insecure because of Alex Salmond? 35% women represented in Parliament, only 22% in England. Physician, heal thyself.
thank you, Hardy.
We did have a question about the...
I don't want to run this one for too long.
Defence was mentioned, so that should be good.
Yeah, we had a question about the armed services.
Yeah, well, I'm sure David will also want to say something on this, but defence is a key issue here. Of course, you're not just talking about the nuclear deterrent, you're not just talking about who one would pledge allegiance to, you're also talking about jobs in Scotland. And of course, that is, as David just said, a huge industry in some areas. In fact, almost the dependent industry in some areas. Unfortunately, it seems that there is no credible plan put forward by the SNP to cater for rejuvenisation of those areas post-defence, shall we say, withdrawal, and whether or not there would be at all. We just don't know. Again, it's unfair to say there aren't any unanswered questions because there are plenty, and defence is certainly one of them.
I can tell you one thing, 98% of Scottish soldiers have told their officers that they do not want to serve in any army other than the British Army, and they have been told discreetly that that is the case. And if that's the case in Scotland, apart from a few lags who wanted to end the days stamping passports at Carlisle, that's a worrying thing. But more important than that, and this is what I find annoying, that over 1 million Scots have been disenfranchised all over the world. If you're not living in Scotland, you do not get a vote. If it's anything to do with the European Union, then they're out or whatever, and there was a referendum, then if you were living abroad or whatever, you would get a postal vote. Not if you're Scottish. You can arrive in Scotland the day before yesterday, and you can get a vote. Any citizen from the European Union resident of Scotland gets a vote. And in my building in Edinburgh, there was a drug dealer who was shot to death about 6 months or a year ago. His card came through the door. He's got a vote, and he was a Nigerian who had no leave to remain, wasn't supposed to be in the country. But he's got a vote. Now, if that's the case, that means there was massive gerrymandering by Sam, and it's not being a true reflection.
I'm keen to get more questions in, but Mark, just want to make a quick comment on that, and then we'll bring in more questions. And the gentleman over there's next, if we get the microphone over there.
On Rory's point, it's the first time I've ever heard a speaker from the Thatcherite Freedom Association argue that what a country needs is heavily nationalised industries run by the state in order to keep employment going.
I didn't say that.
His argument about the defence industry. The defence industry is a nationalised, state-run industry, and the idea that in an independent Scotland that winds down defence.
BAE Systems is not state-run.
Yeah, but it's state-funded.
Well, it's
state-funded. You want massive state...
Let Mark finish his point, and I want to bring in more questions.
Your argument, Rory, was that massive state funding of a particular industry is what jobs and employment require.
We don't want to dive into this here, let Mark finish.
I as a free market capitalist reject that. And look, with regard to military matters, I'm not saying it can be solved at the stroke of a pen. But let's be honest, military matters are pretty integrated across the West. The Americans control the guidance system on our nuclear missiles. The idea that we wouldn't have some form of integrated command management in our military structures with Scotland is completely ridiculous. We've had it across the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, across NATO, which involves many more diverse countries than really England and Scotland. That needs to be worked out. It can't be done at the stroke of a pen. Maybe it will take 2 years, but it is not an imponderable or an impossible thing to solve. We've managed to solve it with the Spanish, the French, the Germans, people we were at war with, people we've been close to for the past 300 years. It won't be easy, it will be technical, but it is definitely deliverable.
Thank you, Mark. Can I remind people that ask questions to try and make them questions and not talk for too long, please? Because I feel that we jumped around quite a bit there. The gentleman here with the microphone, please, next.
Yeah, hi there. It's not the real problem for putting patriotism aside for both England and Scotland. The real overarching economic problem is that we all spend
Can you talk about that?
That we all spend a lot more money than we make, and that this is gradually working to the detriment of both countries. The solution that the UK typically has had is that when we have a lot of money and the economy's great, we vote for Labour governments who are very good at spending money, and when that goes bust, we elect Tory governments who typically we deem to be good at fixing the economy. So in an independent Scotland, where you wouldn't have that alternative, you'd end up having a left of centre and even a more left alternative in Scotland. So I'm just wondering, to what extent do you agree with the irony that if 10 years down the line in independence, if you if you buy that theory, that Scotland have no alternatives as they could actually decay. So they would actually have to do what every small country does, like Ireland, which is to radically cut taxes to really try to increase the free market. So Scotland actually ends up becoming a much more free market economy 15 years down the line, like the original home of Adam Smith.
Yeah.
And so that's my broad question. I just want to make just two very quick points to Hardeep. You mentioned about the...
You just totally ignored what I just requested. It's more can we just stick on the socialism thing? So it's been brought up that Hardy wants to come in, so I'll let him come in at this point.
Again, we seem to have lost sight of a fundamental component here. I celebrate the democracy that elects somebody like David to the European Parliament. A man against Europe stands for election to an institution he hates and loathes. I celebrate that democracy as I celebrate any democracy where the will of the people is listened to. If Scotland chooses in 5 years to elect extensively more Tory MPs than pandas, I am behind the settled will of the Scottish people. The Scottish people will decide what's best for them, whatever that outcome is. But the other thing you need to bear in mind is that there is an opportunity, a genuine opportunity, to create a new sort of Northern European country that could perhaps lead England, could perhaps lead England.
Thank you. David will have a quick comment on that, and then we'll get the microphone over to the gentleman over there with his hand raised. Please.
Venezuela is a long French country. Its people are pretty poor, so I don't think we want to emulate that. I agree with Hardy that I'm all for democracy, and it's great that Scots have elected me, and it just shows you. I mean, we looked at the figures. It looked like we'll get 7 members of the Scottish Assembly come the election, Scottish Parliament rather, and we will get. And we'll probably get several Scottish members of Parliament from Scotland. I hope to be one of them. So it's not set in stone. People in Scotland people generally vote against something. People have been voting against MP to keep the socialists out because they made such a mess in Scotland over the years. And after the referendum and the SNP lose, the tectonic plates in Scotland will shift. And I think you're going to see strange things happening, including quite a few UKIP people getting elected, because they're not the same target parties. They're not a bunch of Edmonds, Listers and Kilts, which is basically the Scottish National Party, and they're not the Conservative Party in Scotland, which is a dead-in-the-water party, and we're not the mafia that is the Labour Party in Scotland, the Politburo, and people are fed up with Easter houses, states like that. They're voting for UKIP. So, Hardy, you might find yourself as a UKIP government in Scotland.
Thank you. I think that seems to be addressed the question as well. I'm going to the gentleman here and then the lady there next.
Well, I have to say that there are certainly more UKIP supporters in Scotland than the gentleman on the end would give credence to. And certainly the Scottish values are Conservative values, and they are coming back to the fore because, as Mr Coburn points out, the Scots are sick to death of socialism. It's destroying the country. There are more public sector workers in Scotland than there are actually private sector, and that's not self-sustaining. In terms of the oil, the question I do have is, you have an SNP government that is less than 30%, so it's probably not the government that the Scottish people voted for, in the same way that they claim that the Conservatives are not what Scotland voted for. But when you come right down to it, they base the whole argument on oil. Oil is a carbon fuel. The SNP are pro-green. Within the European Union and throughout Scotland, they are definitely looking towards getting rid of the carbon fuels. How are they going to pay for it if they get rid of oil? I mean, it just beggars belief that it's not actually come up in the debate.
Thank you, sir. That was very clear. It's good to bring it on towards. I'll leave this for one of you. So Mark would like to comment on it.
It goes a bit to the previous question. Look, I'm a low tax, low spend kind of government. I think taxes are too big, governments are too big, governments spend too much, governments spend more than they bring in. I think we've got to go way, way further in government spending. In the name of austerity, we are still spending something like £100,000 million a year over and beyond what we're bringing in tax revenue in the United Kingdom, and I think that is a disaster. But If you basically believe in democracy and you vote for stupid policies, you get stupid outcomes. Now, I don't know whether in an independent Scotland the Socialist Party will win, the SNP, UKIP, the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats might have some sort of resurgence. Nobody's been mad enough yet to suggest that in the room, but conceivably so. It's up to you. If you continue to vote for governments that spend more than they bring in, you're going to have a handcuffed. But I believe in self-determination, and I believe in democracy, and I believe in people to decide their own destiny. And that means that I have to respect choices that I think are ill-judged, stupid, or even on occasion dangerous. And I respect, as Hardeep said he would if the Conservatives had a resurgence in Scotland, respect that as the decision-making process, whatever I actually think of the decision made by the demos in that country.
Thank you.
Tiny wee point.
Quick addition.
If you are a firm believer in the Scottish Conservatives, then an independent Scotland is a place for you. But equally, respect the people of Scotland a wee bit more than you do. If I may finish, sir, as I gave you the good grace to finish, perhaps you might give me the same. In an electoral system, Holyrood, designed for there never to be a majority party, the SNP is a majority party, you have to respect the settled will of the Scottish. You can shake your head all you want, sir. Look at the electoral system. It's a majority.
Okay,
It's a majority.
I don't want to have discussions between you two now. I'll let Rory come in to balance it, and then we'll move swiftly on to the next question.
Thank you, Marcus. There is a point here in that, firstly, we're talking about the respecting the decision of this vote. We don't know what's going to happen next, so that's a moot point, in effect. The issue about carbon taxes and the like goes back to the European Union. Those things are also being brought about through the EU network, and again it makes a mockery of this vote because it is not a vote concerning independence in the round, as Scotland will still be, under current SNP plans, part of the European Union, which will be dictating policy.
Thank you. Lady on the edge here has a question.
Hi, my name is Rebecca. Thank you very much for sharing the debate. And I'm also appreciative of Hardeep having mentioned that he would preferably sat with a woman panellist. I'm also appreciative of the fact that, indeed, Marcus, you did try.
So you want to join us?
No, I don't think I know enough about it. I'm English.
Doesn't seem to stop some people.
I've worked most of my adult life abroad in many of the countries that I imagine UKIP would be offensive about, but that's not really the point. One lady has asked a question, and I'm not sure she was given the appropriate responses or platform. I am curious to know, though, if women are not on this panel, and certainly women have not been represented as much, possibly in terms of constitutional debate, gender inequality, and certainly not on this platform today. That may perhaps be an indication of what women are interested in, and supposedly more sort of local politics. Certainly what we've seen, I haven't really been following the debate that closely, but I do know that the older women are still seem to be voting more towards no. And perhaps that's fears about the health, particularly, of which women do have to grapple with more, particularly in Scotland, with the aging population of men living not as long. I would like to know, to the No campaign, picking up on the gentleman earlier, rather than being told what is in it for England, what is in it for women, particularly older women in Scotland, which doesn't pertain to foreign policy and oil.
Yeah, David will take that one.
Quite frankly, I don't believe there's any difference between men and women. I think we're all equal. We're just people, and that's what I care about. I think that people should stop worrying about other things rather than that. Quite frankly, if people want to worry about the health service, they say, Nicola Sturgeon says, oh, the health service in Scotland will be wonderful. We're going to cure cancer, we're going to cure everything. Everything's going to be wonderful. And there'll be a public health service, there'll be no privatisation. Well, today we see in the newspapers that apparently she's been sending all sorts of subsidised stuff out to various private health companies and all the rest of it. And if the Scottish Parliament wasn't in session, she'd be getting a right rollicking from them right now. So, quite frankly, the SNP have got the same problems that people in England have with the health service. It has to be organised properly. And if you're going to have unlimited open border immigration through the EU in Scotland or in England or anywhere else for that matter, you cannot plan ahead, and the reason the health service is going down this morning is because you cannot plan ahead. And anyone can come here, and for years people were coming here, foreigners were coming here, getting the medical stuff and going home, and nobody questions it when you talk about hospitals.
Like Nigel Farage's wife, for example.
Well, I think that's cheap and rather childish. But quite frankly, well, it's super childish. I mean, we're talking about people coming to this country and using the health service who have no right to do so. And that's been going on for years. The health service has been bleeding for years. And everybody knows it. And nobody dares say anything about it for political correctness.
Okay.
And people are stick to their all that.
Thank you. I think just to remind me, that's kind of related to how the women are going to be affected by the spending between the venues.
Well, I have some sympathy with David on saying it would be difficult to imagine a broad sweep of policies that particularly favour, say, older women as opposed to older men. You could design such policies. I mean, it's difficult to imagine it. I think the change that will happen, which I would welcome, actually, and you mentioned Adam Smith a bit, is I fear that too much of the debate in Scottish politics at the moment, from all the parties, is about how to spend money. What should we spend money on? What's the next programme we should endorse? And because Scotland is shackled by being in the United Kingdom, there isn't yet a mature debate in Scotland about how do we raise money? How do we make the Scottish economy supercharged? How do we get 3, 4, 5% growth in Scotland? Rather than just worrying about how we slice up the pie on government expenditure. And now, to some degree, I think that's because Scotland has a different, more left-of-centre political culture, but in some degree it's because it's not independent. So I think elderly women, elderly men, the population at large in Scotland would benefit from that focus being, which it would be much more so in an independent Scotland, how do we make the economy grow, not just how do we slice up the government budget in a particular way to favour particular groups.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the next question, and I've got a couple of people who have put in questions in advance. So I'm going to take one from Jonathan Lee, which is, I know it's a bit, but he's made two, so I'm going to just choose one. What would happen to Scotland's large public sector that currently caters for the UK needs? Who wants to go first on that?
I will. I've got a good answer to that. A great deal, all the tax for the United Kingdom, Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, whole shebang, is all done at Centre 1 in, what do you call it, East Kilbride and another place in Cumbernauld. Now, they employ a great number of civil servants and a great deal of employment from both those towns. Now, if Scotland was to separate from England, those jobs would go south, because no English government is going to be able to explain why those jobs stay in Scotland. And this is half the trouble. That, you know, everybody, once you break all this stuff up, you don't know where it's going to go. As a matter of fact, UKIP are going to go and distribute. It's the first time in my life I've actually distributed leaflets in favour of the tax man. So I'm going to be going out delivering leaflets to save the tax man's job. My father will be turning in his grave for me.
Thank you. Come back from the side, please.
Well, I mean, again, I find this oddity from people who are of get Britain out of the European Union position, who spend most of their time complaining that there's too many bureaucrats employed, right? David in particular wants everybody who's employed in London as a European Union bureaucrat to lose their job. I think there are far too many bureaucrats pushing paper around, pay too much money, very often working on useless programmes. Not true of all of them, but true of too many of them. I think Scotland needs less bureaucracy. Yeah, good if these bureaucrats are got rid of from that part of the world. The idea that we should stay, the idea that Scotland should stay in the United Kingdom because there's employment for bureaucrats in a part of Scotland, I think is a feeble.
Well, there's a quick one from Hardeep. And then
here's the thing, you can choose to be very black and white about this, or you can choose actually to see this as a remarkably unprecedented event in European and world history, actually. And there will be new ways forward, innovative ways forward, as yet not thought, not imagined ways forward. And that's what I find so exciting. I find it so exciting that a nimble country of 4.5 million people could have a different tax system. I don't believe that there should be so many. I believe there are, in fact, it's a fact, there are more angel investors in Scotland per head of population than any other country in the world. So perhaps it is time to unleash Scotland, to stop it being reliant so much on England, and to allow it to get on and fulfil its own destiny.
Thank you, Hardy. As the lady here has been waiting very patiently, so we'll have a question from her. Oh, sorry, Rory.
Let's hear the question.
Hi there, mine is a very basic question. Why do you actually need independence? Because the things that take voters out to vote are education, health, and sometimes the legal system. So Scotland has been in the forefront for such a long time in education, in health, free prescriptions, etc. So there is a lot of good things that, if independence comes, will these deteriorate? Very basic question.
I think the reason that Scotland needs independence is I believe that Scotland's destiny is about considerably more than that. Now obviously, with Hollywood, Scotland has certain powers and it does things, and it does things differently to England. I mean, not massively differently, but differently. They're, beyond nuance. And I think, why not apply that to issues like the taxation system? I mean, you can't do, that's what I was making, you can't just have a debate about, how much money are we going to spend on education and health. You need to have a debate about how it's going to be raised. And it might be that in Scotland, the Scottish people and their elected officials in their wisdom decide on a very different tax system. Maybe, income tax lower, wealth tax higher, or maybe the other way round. At the moment, that power does not lie in Scotland. Its ability to tax things differently is so minuscule, it's basically local government. And I actually welcome tax competition. I would like the Scots to experiment with how we're going to raise the money to pay for these various things, and the English perhaps do it differently. And you learn from best practice. And at the moment, the Scots don't have that. So we are locked in so many things, the taxation system effectively being a monolithic example of it. And then everything's decided is bloody Whitehall, the entire tax arrangement. Let's learn from each other, let's experiment and see what works. And Scotland and England have different approaches with big levels.
Who decides?
Sorry, because I know Warry's itching to get involved, and I think I've given too much time to this slide for the further answers.
Thank you. I would just, I agree actually with the premise of Mark in terms of the competition. But again, we have so many unanswered questions. With the vote less than 3 weeks away, there is no plan of action to enhance the already established type of infrastructure there. And I think actually, Mark, I'd like to respond to what he's been saying throughout this debate in the sense of equating the better off out and get Britain out vote to this Scottish independence vote. They are very different things. In fact, he should know, because I was runner-up in a Brexit prize that had a roadmap for the UK outside the European Union, run by the IEA, and unfortunately, there is no roadmap for Scottish independence. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got quite a lot of audience on this version wanting to get involved, so I'm sorry not all of you are going to get a chance to go in, but we're going to go to the gentleman just to get another question from the sheet.
Hi, I guess the relationship has been going for about 300 years, with Scotland being part of the Union. For about 40 years, we've had oil in the North Sea. A lot of the economic argument for Scotland being independent hinges on the oil. And one thing that is absolutely certain is that will run out one day. So isn't this generation voting for a big party that the following generation is going to have to pay for?
I would rather live on my feet than die on my knees. I don't really. Say to the American slave in the 1770s, you don't want the abolition of the slave trade. Where are you going to live? Where are you going to work? That perhaps sounds like an emotive thing to say, but actually this isn't about oil, this isn't about economics, this is about the self-determination of people. We can't sit here and say we want independence today because everything's rosy, and then when it isn't, decide we want to go. We go independent, we use our wherewithal, our nous, our intelligence, our intellect, and our youth. We will find a way forward. Countries in far less good situations than ours have done so. This is actually, in the wrong place to say this, but it isn't about economics. Okay, I would rather be in an independent Scotland and be poorer than be part of the Union and richer.
Thank you. Just a very quick comment from David.
I was an oil broker for many years, and basically the oil price goes up and down like a League of Little Cubes, whatever. And you cannot judge what you're going to be doing in the future on the oil price. If it goes down massively at a certain period, you could end up doing the entire national health service for Scotland. So it's, to put everything on one commodity is utter insanity.
Thank you. I'm keen to go as many people as possible. Some people did give me some questions in advance. The emphasis here. Do you remember what your question was? Shall I read it out? Yours, yeah. So what kind of embassy protection would Scottish, non-resident, i.e. England-based individuals have abroad? It's a very specific question, probably for you guys to broach first.
What protection?
Yeah, so someone who's Scottish, who isn't actually in Scotland, presumably after the vote, assuming that they decide to have their independence.
I mean, again, I'm sure that they're going to need fantastically complex legal and diplomatic protocols that will have to be designed by experts. But I can't believe that's something that we need to worry about. Luxembourg, with 250,000 citizens, and hardly the grandest standing army of anywhere in the Western world, seems to enable its citizens to go abroad, most of them do, without there being any suggestion that they're shouldering a bigger risk and they should sort of merge with Germany or Holland. If Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, Andorra and San Marino can see their citizens move around Europe and the wider world with protection, then a comparative to them much larger country like Scotland should be able to achieve it with considerable ease.
Thank you, Warry, for coming in.
There is a point here that the FCO and the current diplomatic network that the UK has is one of the most respected in the world, unfortunately, in a way that I disagree with their points about the European Union. I think they are slightly too Europhilic for my liking, but in terms of representation, they are at the top notch, at the top table. In fact, one of them won the IEA Brexit Prize. The point here is that unwinding this will lose some of our standing. And this again comes to the point of the rest of the United Kingdom. Will we retain our standing in the wider world, or will we just let it go? Thank you.
We lose the United Nations seat, we lose the Security Council seat, and that is a concern for England, so wake up England.
Is this the UN that's not managed to do anything to stop the slaughter?
Yes, but you won't have
voters around the world, so yeah, we're going to do even less.
Okay, well, another question for the audience, then another from the sheet, and then we'll kind of near wrap up. So I'll see if you're really keen, as this gentleman is. I might just have to give him another shot. Okay.
Going back to this whole democracy argument, if the majority of Scots do vote for independence based on the assumptions with currency, with the EU, with NATO, and then those assumptions prove to be unviable, I'm not suggesting that they are, but if they are, does that not in itself undermine the democratic legitimacy of that election?
So might I ask that those Liberal Democrats that voted for the Liberal Democrat MPs who were told tuition fees weren't going to be raised, should we call a re-election for that? Maybe a political party that hasn't broken a promise. We operate in a world of realpolitik. We're not voting for the SNP. This is the thing. David has managed to hoodwink you beautifully and charmingly as the screaming queen he is. There are 25,000 members of the SNP signed up. There are 1.3 million people for yes. This isn't about the SNP. This is about the best that we can do in the circumstances we can do it. You can shake your head all you want, sir. But it's the facts.
Can we not have to come back quite yet? We've got the near rounding up, and we're quite keen to get
It was ever the last one, to point. I mean, any nation that strikes out for independence faces exactly that question. Whether it's the United States of America kicking out King George or anybody else, it's always going to be that way. If your rule applied there, no country would ever seek independence from anyone, ever.
Thank you. I need to give this side a chance to come back.
Thank you, Chairman. My answer to the question is absolutely. The question is, what will happen next? Will there be another vote on independence? We just don't know. But there is no roadmap, there are unanswered questions, and it's not in the proper state of discussion to vote in such a manner. And there is a vote going to be on the 18th of September. We should respect that vote, but I'm merely raising a point that these questions remain unanswered and have to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a pre-written question. I like it because it mentions London, after all, where we are. So it's from Peter Twist. Do you want to stand up and make a question?
My question is, will an independent Scotland increase or decrease the gravitational pull of London?
No, sorry. Say again.
Will an independent Scotland increase or decrease the gravitational pull of London?
Thank you. Does anyone want to take that one on?
I think, yes, it will, actually.
For
the short term.
Which one?
The gravitational
increase or decrease.
But you've got to remember, as I mentioned in the opening statement, the European Union factor here. I may be sounding like a broken record, but it is an important point. The decreased influence of the rest of the United Kingdom will come into play in future years concerning financial regulation if the rest of the United Kingdom still remains the part of the EU. The EU has shown its true colours before, it will show it again, and it will increase its influence. So in the short term, with all the Scottish bankers and investment funds coming down, yes. In the long term, I doubt it.
Thank you. We're actually getting towards rounding up now. I'm conscious of time, and we do need to. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm very sorry to the ones that were itching to go questioning, but we're going to have to actually move towards the roundup. So start finding these. Frisk yourself and find out which pocket you put it in, and get thinking. So we started with the yes side last time. So if I could ask the no camp, who do you want to go? Okay, so Rory's going to start. We've got about 3 minutes, and there'll be a bucket passing around back to front. You get your thing ready, just swap the one that you think it is. You can't abstain this time. If we could get that moving swiftly, please, because I know this, otherwise it will cause delay. So, to be safe, you've got a little bit longer, because I know that this thing is so go ahead, Rory, thank you.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Marcus. Well, you've obviously covered a lot of subjects here. Obviously not really enough to get some answers out of the opponents on the Yes Scotland side, but we hope that for another day. They've got about 12 days to answer these questions, maybe a bit more, before we go to the polls, or sorry, before those in Scotland go to the polls. The idea here, though that's been missing from the debate, is the UK's, I think, positive relationship with the world as it stands in the UN, outside, within the Commonwealth. The idea, I'm not going to say the European Union, I'm not going to fall in that trap, because I don't think we have a positive relationship with the European Union. However, the idea of our shared brand, so to speak, on the world stage, I think has contributed something, and there's something else that hasn't been mentioned during the debate, and that's the history of it. What happened when Scotland voted to come on board with the United Kingdom? Well, the Scottish economy was in a state of ill repair. What we can see from the 300 odd years of union has been a flourishing relationship that has built an economy that is truly integrated, that I would argue has built a culture that shares similar values, and also that led my father from Kilmarnock down to England as part of the Royal Air Force. So actually, I think there is something good in this union. I think we have proven the good. I think we have enhanced our standing in the world, and as a result, I implore you, if you do have a vote, you haven't voted, vote better together, and if you're voting just now, do the same, because this flag means something. And I hope you agree. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could pass your bits of paper to the middle aisle, that will make this process a little bit swifter. That would be a huge favour if you could do that, please. Pass them towards the middle. No, absolutely not. I'm afraid no. No. We're in the closing stages. No. So who's closing on this side? Hardeep. Thank you.
Gosh. I'm not gonna wave a flag. I'm not going to wave the Sultan. This isn't about waving flags. It seems to be a necessity that political debates of this nature are predicated on finding the extremes at either end and pitting them against each other for entertainment and for added value and an attempt at more information. The reality is that these divisions are not the actual divisions that exist in this argument. People are much closer in Scotland, yes and no and undecided, than debates that this suggests. There are amazing people on the no side, there are amazing people on the yes side, and my hope is that as a country we move together, whatever the outcome. I believe in the settled will of the Scottish people, and I believe that, Scotland never voted to join the Union. There was no vote.
The Parliament did.
Yeah.
The Parliament
there was no vote in Scotland to join the Union. That was a necessity at the time. All I'm saying is that try not to think of it as black and white, because it isn't. There is a new way to forge, a new way forward. England is a Tory bastion, and if that's what England wants, congratulations, good luck with that, and all that comes with it. Again, I realise geographically I'm speaking to a minority in this room. But you can't sweep away lots of history. You can't sweep away, neither do we ask you to. You can't sweep away families across borders. There is a will and a desire as neighbours with a friendly rivalry to work together. We don't hate the English. Some of my best friends, know English people. As long as we can laugh together and discuss together and debate together, we can live together. But maybe we don't need to govern together. Maybe it's a dream that will become a reality.
So, has everyone casted their vote? And could I have a shout out from the counters over there? How near are we to resolution?
1:37.
So there's an Englishman, an Irishman, and a Scotsman.
What a marvellous example of an integrated society.
I won't carry that, but go on then. You've got your chance.
Just a quick question to you. How many Scottish people are in this room and how many are non-Scottish?
That would be interesting. Go on then. So I'll do this by my scientific method. So if you're Scottish in the room, can you stick that in? Yeah. If you're well, no, it'll get really complicated. Then. If you feel Scottish, can you thrust that in there? If you feel anything else, English, British, then put that in there. Let's just keep it simple. It'll get very complicated. So Scottish, not very many. Are we going with, do we think 10% is around about there? Is that what we're going with? So there's 10% people here who classify themselves as Scottish.
And Alex again, what is even though you may have signed the original act of human or your ancestors.
So there we go. Go on then.
I do live half my time in Scotland actually, and what I would like to say to the room, I do understand most of you, but I would like to reassure you one thing, is actually there is a lot of real debating going on in Scotland, in families, in pubs. Sometimes in Glasgow it's a bit biased, sometimes in Edinburgh it's a bit biased the other way. But there's real debating, I've been very impressed with that. And also I'm very impressed with the democracy in the UK. So we now have a coalition because the UK voted for it. And what you will see in Scotland is they will vote for the right vote. And 85% of people in Scotland want to be independent. They really believe that. The reason they may not get 85%, they might get 50%, is because they worry about the uncertainty and they worry about the viability. But that is the only reason.
Okay,
and to say SNP, Alex Salmond gets one vote, and after the vote of independence, Scotland will vote for its own government. And the reason the SNP are there is because people wanted to vote for independence.
Vote for Alex Salmond for the last time ever again.
And the Norwegian result, guys. Here we go. Did you give me the percentage? Does it add to 100?
They're still undecided. Even though they couldn't vote, they still had 2 undecided, so it's 3% undecided. We thought we better include them. That's 3. How many? Sorry. So that's too many. So that's 3. But we rounded up. Yeah.
I mean, the moment of intrigue was well past. I think obviously you always see cycling and things. Oh gosh. Well, now you can. It's a little bit bigger. So, I can say that should Scotland be an independent country, I can confidently say that at 63% no, that the question to be answered strongly in that favour. However, of course, the reason why we've taken vote for 4.5 was to see there being a swing. So, with that going from 72% to 63%, and the yes side going from 17 to 35%, I can actually declare that the argument has been won by the yes side. So I think both sides really on that basis deserve a round of applause. There seems to be no final way of voting off by thanking the speakers with a bottle of famous grass, which happens to be the Duke of Edinburgh's favourite tickle.
And it's not even a single ball. There's Margaret Thatcher's as well.
Well, there you go, Margaret Thatcher's favourite tickle too. Sure that will please Hardeep.
Well, I can tell you, coughing like a drake, this is going to be used for purely medicinal purposes.
All of it.
All of it, in one slug.
So that was rather sort of clumsily done. I should have had the variation. Anyway, so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the speakers for coming. Big thank you to Jonathan who helped me line up with the speakers. And thank you to all of you for coming, especially my regular members who come and we hang out over the last Thursday every month. And especially the new people too. It's nice to see new faces too. And hopefully some of you might be tempted to come along and hang out with us regulars on the last Thursday every month too. On that note, there was a bit of paper going around to collect email addresses. I hope that, I don't know where that's got to. Does anyone? Hey, that's good. That's a good sign. So if you haven't put your name down on that and would like to, it's coming to the front here. That'd be fantastic. And really, that's it. We've got this room for a little bit longer if you want to meet each other, mix and mingle and chat and argue and all the rest of it a little further. That's absolutely fine. Hit someone.
Egg someone.
Egg someone. Sure, some of you got some ready for David. So I'd like to say thank you everyone for coming again. Hope to see you another one soon. Cheers.